Good afternoon. Welcome to this installment of Tulane University's Presidential Speaker Series as we welcome General David H. Berger, United States Marine Corps retired, Tulane class of 1981, to campus for an insightful conversation about his remarkable career, his Tulane roots, and the lessons we can draw from his years of service. My name is Michael Wallace, and I'm joined here by my colleague, Becky Rouse. We are both professors of practice in the Emergency and Security Studies program in the School of Professional Advancement. We are both proud veterans. Becky served in the Army, and I served in the Navy. We are a part of Tulane's Veterans Faculty and Staff Affinity Group, which aims to advocate for our military and veterans on campus, whether students, staff, or faculty. We work across all of Tulane to facilitate the inclusion of veterans, military members, and their families into the Tulane community by supporting recruitment, retention, camaraderie, and ongoing success in collaboration with like-minded organizations. When General Berger was here for the conferment of his honorary degree, we had a chance to briefly talk, and he invited me to attend a social reception at the commandant's house and the Marine Corps Friday night parade in Washington, D.C. This is a very big deal. A few months later, I took my son to the social and the parade. Even though there are members of Congress and many high-ranking officials and officers at the social, General Berger took the time to come over and speak to my son, introduce his wife, and talk about his recent visit to Tulane. My son was awed. I was too. This is the type of person he is, very generous to everyone, and I just witnessed this again. He spent over an hour and a half talking to midshipmen and cadets at the Naval ROTC building just a few minutes ago. I would like to think that Tulane had a little bit to do with that. Welcome back to Captain, sir.
Sir, as Mike said, I am Becky Rouse, and I'm holding my card behind my back because I'm going to ad-lib for a second. The General probably knows, and some of you may as well, that there's one thing you never call a Marine, and that is a soldier. Am I right, sir? But Clint Eastwood does it all the time in his movies, so if you ever see that, you can shout at the TV like I often do and think about Marines getting hot about that. And then a man named General John Lejeune characterized Marines as soldiers of the sea. So we're going to make sure we get you a T-shirt, sir, that says proudly, "Call me a soldier of the sea." The only person in the room who gets it is General Berger, I promise you. It is my honor to introduce the 15th president of Tulane University, Michael A. Fitz. During his 10 years as president, he has overseen a number of initiatives that have elevated Tulane to a new level of excellence. Our campuses are transforming with $1 billion in new construction and upgrades. Our research enterprise is growing by leaps and bounds. New scholarship programs are expanding access to Tulane education, and the university is spearheading a historic revitalization of Tulane's downtown campus and the surrounding neighborhood. President Fitz has also built on Tulane's tradition of supporting veterans and active duty military through tuition assistance and a variety of resources, including our Veterans Faculty and Staff Affinity Group. And at the Veteran Students of America kickoff, sir, you may remember we had a little conversation about what is a bootlicker. So we educated each other. There were none there that night, by the way. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming President Mike Fitz to the stage.
Thank you, Becky and Michael. I must say I was going to start out by congratulating all of you of coming through 10 inches of snow to this event. Needless to say, I was a little surprised to learn you would all be literally hot from what's happened. I think we've seen the biggest change in weather in the history of New Orleans over the past week. But anyway, welcome to the Presidential Speaker Series. Really, we've had extraordinary figures on campus, and I think today's speaker adds luster to this group. As we heard, General David Berger is an '81 graduate of Tulane University and the 38th Commandant of the Marine Corps. Just to give a quick overview, he's had truly a legendary military career in terms of actually leading in combat, but he's been truly impactful, literally one of the most impactful leaders, certainly of the Marine Corps, if not the military, in reshaping the Marine Corps. He really is a model for leadership, and the lessons that we're going to talk about are really applicable, I think, across the board to what's going on wherever sort of role you have. He grew up, I should note, in rural Maryland, and the first Marine he ever met was on the Tulane campus. He was in Tulane ROTC and graduated with a degree in engineering. Joined the military, infantry, when he left, and had a variety of different combat roles. My point is to really give you a sense of the variety of different experiences he had that literally led to him being such, at this point, become a legendary leader. He led a battalion in Haiti for Operation Secure Tomorrow, a regiment in Operation Iraqi Freedom, and then a 1st Marine Division in Operation Enduring Freedom in Iraq. He had various administrative commands, strategic command, chief of staff, director of operations. He got a degree from another university. We'll forgive him for the moment. Johns Hopkins University on international affairs. And Lloyd Austin, the Secretary of Defense, called him the quintessential warrior scholar. And I think you'll pick up a lot of that in the Q&A. He became Commandant of the Marine Corps in 2019 and undertook a truly massive restructuring of it, encapsulated in Force Design 2030, which many have called the most dramatic transformation of the Marine Corps in decades, and maybe of any part of the military. We can say a lot of things about the Pentagon, but probably change does not come easily. And he truly was a change agent. And we'll talk a little bit about what he did, but it was really moving from tanks and cannons, sort of more traditional missiles and drones, changing the structure of the units. It was very controversial. Let me say very, very controversial. But good decisions don't come easily. And I think everyone now recognizes that it was an incredible improvement in military preparedness. And you just finished writing a report with Michael Blumberg on how you innovate in those contexts. Retired from the Marine Corps after 42 years. In honor of his service and impact, received an honorary degree from Tulane University. We are so proud of him and what he's done, as should the country. He really epitomizes our motto, not for oneself, but for one's own, truly selfless and thoughtful. And people have said of him, he's very quiet, very thoughtful, very studied, but very willing to make hard decisions and move forward. And it's that combination that I think has really defined him. So let's have another round of applause in welcoming. So David, why don't we start out here at Tulane University, which you, I guess, arrived in 1977, it would have? Looked exactly the same, I'm sure. I mean, just completely the same, as I'm sure we did at that time. But what's interesting is, you're known as somebody who's been such a change agent and taken over in the Marine Corps, but you didn't follow the traditional route of going to Annapolis. You came to Tulane and played lacrosse, ROTC, and engineering, but didn't follow that path. I mean, what was it like for you here at Tulane? And how does that bear into the fact that you've had this extraordinary career in the military?
Fair question. I thought I was going to Duke. because my dad graduated from Duke. He was an engineer, then he went to work for the National Security Agency. I was half good at math and science, so I applied to here as a backup plan, but I was going to Duke. And I applied for ROTC scholarships because my dad told me they would pay for college. And I didn't know anybody in the military, so my dad is my role model, and I filled out applications for all the services. We went to Duke. Dad and I drove down to Duke, my high school senior year. And I was accepted at Duke, and we went to, I want to say like the housing office, and he got the runaround. We got the runaround. There was no housing available or something. It was after about, 2 hours, we got back in the car and drove back to our farm in Maryland. That was it. And he'd been probably given to Duke, he's not rich, but probably this was, okay. So then we had to fly to New Orleans, Plan B. Completely different reception here. And I'd never been outside of Maryland except for Maryland and Virginia. I mean, but this place seemed, you all know this to be true, but it was just very different, and the people were welcoming. The ROTC unit was it was great, and I already knew of the reputation of the engineering school. That's why I applied for it as Plan B, so I came here. My dad was a double E, so of course that's what I started out in, and I lasted until, you already know this, but I lasted until the end of the first semester and went home on probation with a 1.9 grade point average. And double E was probably not going to be for me. And at the same time, I told his midshipman, at the same time I was applying for ROTC scholarship, because I was not on a scholarship. I was a college program. So thank God the Navy, Marine Corps, whoever looks at those scholarship applications did not see my 1.9 grade. So I was probably one of the few that got a scholarship and was on academic probation at the same time. It's perfect. It was a long way from a 1.9 to graduation. To your question, what was life here? It was awesome. The NRTC unit was like 130 or 150 people. It was in itself like 3 fraternities rolled together, and all of them were in fraternities. And the school itself was hard. Engineering was hard, but fair. And the deans and instructors were great. And they, thank God, took me back the second semester and said, probably not going to be a double E. Maybe mechanical might be in your future. So I switched. The school and the environment here gave me more than I thought when I left here, I guess, which is probably the case with most people when they graduate from college. How do I know that? I think my parents gave me the values to come here and survive, but I think the academic environment here and the engineering school and the ROTC unit gave me the level of discipline that I would need. They gave me a way of attacking tough problems mentally that paid off for me I didn't know this was going to be the case, but for 4 decades. Whether it was in the infantry in the field or in the Pentagon, same methodical, analytical, take a wicked problem apart and figure out what the options might be and move. This school armed me, but I didn't know that probably for 25 years, actually. But somebody asked me when I was like a colonel or a general, you have a mechanical engineering degree, but you've never done any mechanical engineering. I said, true, but I've done it every single day wearing a uniform, just in a different way. This place allowed me to reach a low and then climb back out. And I think there's also, in retrospect, and I've never really thought about this, but the culture here, the diversity of the people that live here and the food and the music and the backgrounds and everything coming together in one location armed me for places like Haiti, Fallujah, Afghanistan, where it's a mixed bag, Kosovo for a year, where it's a really mixed bag of people and from very different backgrounds, and you got to work together. I didn't know that to be true, but I think it probably was. This place is not homogeneous by a long shot, but I think it prepped me. I just didn't know it. Just didn't know it.
Do you think it would have been different if you'd gone to one of like the Naval Academy?
Yeah, absolutely, yes. I think, their focus is very much STEM, and I would have gotten a phenomenal education, or no, I wouldn't have finished after the first semester. Okay, but that's a different story. No, I would not. I would have been deprived of everything that New Orleans and Tulane had given me. I would have had an Annapolis view, and everybody sort of the same, everybody there on scholarship, everybody top of their class, everybody the same. I think it would have turned out very different for me, really different. Because here, you're thrown into a melting pot from day one, which is not the first time for me, because the high school was not that at all. This was that. If you can figure out how to work in that environment, how to succeed in that environment, you can do that anywhere. I just didn't know it back then. But I think Annapolis or West Point or Colorado Springs would have prepared me in a very different way. I still would have come into those tough problems later on. I don't think I would have been as equipped. I don't think so.
I mean, what is interesting is you're probably viewed as truly one of the great innovators in the Pentagon and the military. And what you're just saying is, to some extent, you were more open to change and differences because of this environment. Their strengths,
Yes.
and but it. Just before we move on past Tulane, do you have any great memories from your time here that you want to share?
Not so much the first semester. First semester, big
By the
blur.
way, I should tell you, I have a friend I knew for years ago who graduated second to the last in their class from medical school.
Wow.
And they felt very bad about that until the person who graduated last in the class from medical school won the Nobel Prize. and they wrote them a letter and said, "You're next." So, now I guess the president of a university shouldn't say something like that, but it's not exactly inspiring to academic performance. But I just, do you have a sense, anything else, memories from
God,
that?
yeah. My freshman year, I roomed on campus with a Chuck Melita, who was on the baseball team and the football team. I worked at the boot.
Oh no! Can we eliminate that from the record? I don't think you're saying that the way to success in life is the boot, but I mean,
This is the diverse part, Mr. I think, the things that stick out probably are the people, for sure. Because I grew up also, I told you I live on a farm, but in the last 3 or 4 years I worked for Ryland Homes as a carpenter. So I worked my way through college down here also with a couple carpentry companies doing like home remodeling stuff. What a blast, because they were all Cajun. I took a year or two of French in high school, so no way was I going to keep up with their banter at all. They were all like 5'6", constant movement, constant jokes in Cajun, and then the punchline. And I'd be like, "What was that?" And they'd be all howling and laughing, and I wouldn't get it. The people, the Jazz Fest here, I don't know, just one year Mardi Gras with the police were on strike. On the downside, you remember everything, right? This was a terrible year. It was a really hard, tough year. Tough.
I must say, though, people talk about the relational culture of New Orleans, Louisiana, and Tulane, and that truly is a distinctive quality.
It is.
It's not just a personal quality, it's an educational quality, which in your case, it teaches you about life and how to deal in circumstances. So what's amazing about your career is the diversity, I do want to get to, your leadership of the Marine Corps, but the diversity of experiences. I mean, literally, 3 different leading soldiers in battle across 3 different engagements, and then literally administrative responsibilities and an oversight, and then going to school. How did that all? I mean, how do you, for students here, did you do that all intentionally? Was there a method to it? Because really was a wide variety of opportunities.
Probably the common thread in all that is people. It wasn't the events or the locations or the date, it was the human beings involved. And I think unintentional was the people from Tulane that 40 years later, we communicate, we correspond, we ask each other, because you're at this, I didn't think this through, but even though they may be in New York working for an investment firm, you're at the same stage of life. So we're like communicating back and forth, like, how are you dealing with this? I never thought, of course, you don't think of that while you're here going to school, but 30 years later, we're trying to lean on each other for, like, what do you think about this? And probably 50% of them, and there's probably only 30 of them, let's say, 50% of them are from the ROTC unit. And I never served with them, but the common shared part, the human part, is still here. So we talk nonstop. If you were at my retirement a year and a half ago, solid body of Tulane people there, in Tulane garb, drinking all the free beer that I could. Jesus Christ. In a block, sitting in the bleachers. I mean, it was awesome. It was just awesome. It's great.
So there's a lesson there, which I experienced, and you obviously experienced in a very significant way. Is you create in life a cohort of people and experiences, and they know you, and you know them, and you trust them, and they become part of your reference group the rest of your life.
They do.
And I encourage students that the people you get to know here, you can rely on them the rest of your life in a way that,
Can I add to that?
No, absolutely.
The flip side, which is probably counterintuitive, and I'm not sure all cohorts are like this, so I can only talk for the friends that I have from here. They also call you out. In other words, we'll run across each other at something, and a day or two later, they'll send me a text or a note or something going, "You're acting like a jerk," or "You looked really tired," or there's no filter at all. And in a helpful way, because they go instantly to, "You're not being yourself. What's going on?" And they're not doing it in a critical way. They're doing it to quickly get to what's the issue. But because you're so close and have talked for 30 years, there's no warm up there. It's awesome. They just call you out very quickly and say, "You're not acting like yourself. What's going on?" And then that leads to 3 days of conversation, and something is going on, and they peel it back for you.
Well,
it's really strange. Even if you try to hide it, they just see right through that.
So I haven't say in my own life, I think it's always good to have a group of people around you that provide a certain level of diversity of views, so you and a certain degree of trust, so they can call you out. Not publicly, but privately. And that's what it's hard to have that. So all this led up to Force Design 2030, which was this incredible transformation of the Marine Corps. Just to back us up, what led you to think that you needed to transform the Marine Corps?
A few things. It was not a gut feel or instinct. It was over a series of 2 or 3 years, I had participated in war games that involved the Navy and Air Force and Army and Marine Corps and Space Force. And over those 2 or 3 years, the same outcome every time, which was not good. In other words, they're played not today, but in the future.
Right.
They're not training exercises, they're war games postulating in the future, and we were not faring very well, over and over again. That was the first point. The second point that for me was, it was becoming really clear to me a couple things. One, that the government was no longer the lead in a lot of technology areas. It was the private sector, it was the commercial sector, and they were moving very fast, and we were not moving that fast. So the problem is, in other words, technology, which we're going to turn into some military capabilities, was moving quickly. We couldn't adopt it fast enough. Couldn't absorb it fast enough. That's a real problem. The third challenge was, it was very clear that the movement of especially the People's Republic of China and their military was expanding and modernizing super quick and big. And they were not slowing down at all. They had a singular focus on replacing the United States economically, militarily, and they were not slowing down. So there were 3 or 4 kind of ingredients in there that convinced me that even tweaking the system that we have right now, trying to push it was not going to be enough. That you have to actually periodically step back and look at your organization and go, if that's the world in the future, then we have to be competitive, we have to win. What do we need to look like down the road? Not the next step, but this is the difference. How do you postulate where your organization is going to be 8 or 10 years into the future, and then work backwards from that? How do you get to that point? Knowing that a lot of uncertainty, you look out that far, it's going to change. So you got to be on feedback loops and all, but I leaped past, in other words, right now where we were. Try to look 8, 10 years into the future. What's the world going to look like? What does the United States need from the Marine Corps? That's what we have to look like. It's a broad aim point, but it's not the next step. And then work backward, plan backwards from there. What's the next to last, that kind of thing.
So you come in actually in an unusual position because you really had been in a position to look at what.
Absolutely.
You weren't just sort of backing in or disappointed.
No.
You knew where you needed to go, but knowing where to go isn't getting you there.
No.
And I assume the Marine Corps is, it's a great organization, but change does not come easily to any organization. And I assume one that's been in existence. How many years is the?
This year, 250.
250. So there's
250 years.
True. So
There's a culture. Yeah, I mean, you're talking around it, Mr. President, but there is a culture in any organization. But if it's 250 years old, it's a deep culture. It's a deep culture. So you have to preserve the core of what I thought. You have to preserve the core of what your organization, the strengths are. You can't let go of that. You can't just, like in naval terms, pull up anchor and just sort of drift around and find out where the next anchor point is. No, you got a good, strong anchor point. Don't lose that. But how do you affect the culture of the organization? Couple things that I did. Like if this was a whiteboard here, a big whiteboard, most people in a business sense, because I went to Harvard Business School to try to understand how they do analysis and stuff before I started. When Marine Corps is not business school, but you're a lifelong student, right? SWOT analysis. Okay, SWOT. And it's a quad chart, and I looked at that and I thought, oh, that's not going to work for us. So another model, and I'm sure it pre-existed, but we just sat in a room, drew on a whiteboard concentric circles. And in the middle of the very center point was what by law is the Marine Corps required to do. And then the next circle was things in there we have to do that enable the middle, and then the next, and then the next. Why did we go through that exercise? Because for the Marine Corps, it disciplined us to look at all the things that we were doing and spending money on, and which circle were they in. It's a structured way to take apart that problem. So we got to what the core purpose of the Marine Corps is in that 10 ring in military kind of jargon, and then we put things in the outer rings, and we knew if we have to make decisions, hard decisions, we know where we're going to make them. So it wasn't emotional.
Right.
It was this ring. If you live in this ring, you have to directly contribute to the next one. The next one's got to contribute to that. And in the middle is the Marine Corps exists to fight and win. That's why we have a Marine Corps.
Just to encapsulate, you're saying you went up to 10,000 feet,
Yeah.
and you said, what are we about? What are our goals?
Yeah.
What support those goals?
Right.
So then nothing's personal. It's just a question of how you fit into those goals.
It is and it isn't, Mike. It's personal because in each of those rings there's people. There's
Well,
human beings.
I understand.
But that's
if
the hard part.
But it's a way of,
Yes.
In other words, you're not saying to them, I want to change you because I don't like you or respect you.
Right.
It's putting it in terms of, it is so personal. That's why you do it seems to me.
One way to look at it is you can do what you have to do in different ways. Okay, to me, that's evolution. You do that all the time. Those are tweaks to the engine. But episodically, periodically, you may have to fundamentally change the way you're going to do business. To your second point, though, how do you then come up with a game plan?
Right.
Yeah, because there's going to be resistance, right? No, this isn't going to be easy to do. We, on another whiteboard, drew all the groups of people that we thought had a stake in the Marine Corps in this today and in the change we're going to make. And then after a lot of scratching our heads, we came up with four groups of people that had a stake in it, a say in it, whatever you want to call it. One was Congress, because they legislate and they give us the funds. One was my civilian leaders, the Secretary of the Navy, the Secretary of Defense, the President, the Commander-in-Chief. One group was Marines, who are serving right now, and then the fourth group was veteran Marines, because they have a stake in it. They're part of this ecosystem. After that, four groups. After that, then we started to think through, if you're going to make change, where do you put all your effort into, and where can you accept risk? I knew we could not drive change without the top two bubbles. Without Congress, without the White House and my civilian leaders, we wouldn't get out of the starting gates. We wouldn't go anywhere. Without Marines, within a year or two or three, things would come to a halt. So I knew from the beginning where the risk was going to be at some point. You just don't know when and from what direction, but I knew from the beginning. That's going to be where the friction's going to come from.
The alumni.
Yeah. Exactly. Not because they don't love the Marine Corps, but because they do.
Right. As anybody knows, you did get it was pushback. But, whenever you're implementing change and moving in a direction, there are always going to be people who are not in favor of it. And I just say as an outsider, I think everybody agrees now it was the right decision, but it can't have been easy. In sort of 60 seconds, what was the changes that you did specifically? How did you go
We knew
about it?
We had to reduce the size of the Marine Corps. We had to reshape parts of the Marine Corps. And you can do that either death by 1,000 cuts, or you can make vertical kills. In my view, the death, everybody pays a little bit of a tax, gets a little bit of a less money, that was not going to work. To make at the speed we had to go, we're going to make vertical kills. So the immediate reaction was, we've had tanks for 50 years. They're going to be gone in 12 months. This heavy unit, gone. this other, gone. Because it was not where we needed to go. It was exactly what we needed in Desert Storm. It was very helpful in Korea. It was not what we're going to need in 2030. And people would ask, how can you get rid of tanks? The Army still has tanks. Their tanks are great. I'm like, yeah, we need them in the Army. But if you had watched what was happening in Europe, and even in the last 2 years, you would ask yourself, if you had a son or a daughter and they wanted to go into armor, into tanks, would you feel comfortable with that? With the way that unmanned systems were headed? Is that where the future is? Just making a heavier, more, no, absolutely not. Not for the Marine Corps, no. So kill it. So, long way of saying, by vertical kills, you do a lot of things, but one of them is you bring the resistance right to the surface very fast and you know how to deal with it. It's not a slow bubble, it's quick. But one other part though, I think every executive in the commercial sector that has to do the same probably faces the same. How do you then address that that friction?
Right.
In the public space, how are you going to do that?
How did you, and it must have, by the way, even though you're doing the right thing, it must have been emotionally difficult.
Oh God, yeah. These are the people that trained us.
Right.
These were the generals that were in charge of the Marine Corps when I was growing. They ran the Marine Corps. These are not, it's tough, absolutely tough. I decided early on I was not going to engage in a public debate, although there were more than a handful of people within the Marine Corps said that was the wrong move. I was not going to engage in a back and forth with the retired community on the future of the Marine Corps. I was not going to do that. But there's a risk in that. Then they own the space and it just keeps coming. But I was very careful to protect the office of the commandant of the Marine Corps, and I was not going to go down into a cage match with everybody who had a grudge with what we were doing. Not going to do that. Not in the public space. Privately, different story. But if a 4-star retired general or 3-star whatever wants to take pot shots at where the Marine Corps is going, I was not going to have a fratricide in the media, Marine on Marine, not going to do that. Because I thought that would not be helpful. Not be helpful. On a personal note though, I would offer to you, and some people in here probably have done this, much harder on my wife than me.
Right.
I could let it wash off my back and know that we were doing the right things, but to your spouse who's seen you fight and deployed for months and all, and then to be eviscerated in the media, she was, and still so mad at them and unforgiving at them because they love you, they support you, they sense that what you're doing is hard and right, and they just see these much harder on Donna than me. I didn't anticipate that as my point. I didn't see that coming.
When did you know you'd won?
I don't know that you know that. Combat is the defining feature here. I'll know if the next conflict that we're in, that Marines are prepared, they're organized right, they're led right, they have the right equipment, then I'll know. It's a bet. And the test, you can have training exercises and all that do feed you and they give you some comfort, but the ultimate test is in a conflict.
Well, it's the Mike Tyson comment that everybody has a strategy until they're hitting the Fed, and then they gotta change the strategy.
Right being or wrong being a binary. I think I know I'm super confident that we're headed in the right direction for a couple reasons. One, we're making changes. That tells you a lot. That it doesn't mean you were wrong from the beginning. It means you're a learning organization and you can move and adapt and absorb. Second, I think the middle level of the Marine Corps in enlisted and officers are wholly embracing it and going. They are mad at the Marine Corps is not going faster. And to me, they're going to own the next fight. They're going to pay the biggest price. They have the biggest stake in this, not generals. And me and the sergeant major and the chaplain were in that room in our dress uniform, and she rounded the corner and just, because she knows.
No, I understand.
She's seen it. But I couldn't bear the thought of her finding out the wrong way by a text or a phone call. There's one right way to do it. One right way. Later on, in the big consequential decisions are things like the elimination of the Iranian general. Do you do that or not? What's the advice from the Joint Chiefs? You have the location of them, you have the means to take them out, but basically you're assassinating somebody. And have you thought through the second, third order effects of that? Those are big consequential decisions. But so is the one with the spouse.
Right.
Because it's a moment that she and you are never going to forget. You can't do it wrong. You can't do it wrong. You can't get it wrong.
I know this is impossible to take 42 years and say this was my happiest decision or what I'm taking. But is there a moment where you just felt this was just great what I did? It came out, worked out, that you find joy in it?
100 times, yes. But it's different than you describe. I would imagine the corollary for you is when something happens in one part of the university and you just smile because you are so proud that you let them have the latitude, you gave them the freedom, you supported them, and they just shined. You told me about this moment back there, the medical.
Right.
Okay, those are the moments for us as military leaders. It is never a thing you did, no, but the unit that you helped train, you led, you were hard on. When they shine, it's the best moment in the world. When a Marine, a service member, is screwing up and down and just like in the dump and spiraling down, and somehow you find a way or another leader to engage them, and then 2 years later you see this, how they turned out. You're like, God, you gave him a second chance. Those are the moments. Yeah, absolutely. There's no one, but it's always when the unit or the person or something like that, and I'm sure you have those moments too. It's not your personal cheerleading moment. It's like, because you could have boxed them in and it wouldn't have happened. No.
Well, when you're leading an organization of that size, the success comes through other people and other parts of it.
You start out with a 42-man unit and no budget, right? And you end up with a budget of $56 billion per year and 240,000 employees. But the Marine Corps did a great job of preparing me along the way. They gave me everything I needed.
So let's open it up. I've been dominating the questions.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. My name is Master Sergeant Collier. I'm a staff NCRIC over at Marine Forces Reserves over in Algiers, sir. And I'm actually a student of the business school. I get my MBA graduate in May. And we just narrowly missed each other in 2005 in RCT 8. So, but with the president touched on it earlier, and you did as well. I'm trying to keep my Marines out of the boot and in school as best I can.
Did everyone hear that?
But my question is, sir, is how can we leverage the unique advantages of the digital age, such as increased access to information, to build the younger service members into stronger leaders while also addressing the potential challenges posed by digital distractions and a decline in traditional interpersonal skills and real-time problem solving.
Okay, first of all, the boot that I knew was very different. We had like little study groups going on in there. It's like,
No, that's like the boot today.
oh,
That's
okay.
right.
I'll just pick one area as an example, but not the only, training. I think in everything from machine learning all the way through artificial intelligence to autonomy, if we don't embed that in how we train service members at the beginning and along the way, we are missing the boat completely. They are very comfortable in that environment. We are not. And that is the environment they're going to operate in. They're going to fight in. They're going to be enabled by wingmen and vehicles that are autonomous. We should not be, the senior leaders should not be intimidated by that, because in this case, we're going to be actually in the back seat because we're not comfortable with it. They are. I'm also convinced we have to know enough about it to support it, but we don't have to be masters of it, because we never will. We're not native to that. So we're going to be uncomfortable, uneasy. They're going to embrace it, use it quickly, and probably find applications for stuff we hadn't even dreamed of. Our challenge will be unleashing that potential, because our natural inclination will be to control it. They will run a sprint and we'll say, slow down. Especially in certain areas that you all are watching probably from the bleachers. Let's just take like fighter aircraft right now. We are flying aircraft that are unmanned, that are autonomous as wingmen with payloads that are sensors or shooters, and they can make decisions that take some of the decision making off of the load of this single pilot that's in the F-35. Why would we not want to do that? Why would we not want to do that? But we're not comfortable with that. It's autonomy. Not comfortable with that. I think the digital age that they are very, very comfortable in, that we are not. And if you just take like training and education as an exemplar, we should be more uncomfortable and let go a little bit. And then some things won't work out, but let them run some. But we got to do our own homework to find out where the military applications of that are.
Oh.
I'm happy to do the microphone.
It's fine.
Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Second Lieutenant Warren Wu. I'm currently in the United States Marine Corps. I'm wondering, when you're making a big decision, for instance, force design 2030, who did you consider important to have in that room with you?
Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps first. No joke. For a lot of reasons. Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps. The way that how we used the time to come up with the design was take one colonel, two colonels from each part of the Marine Corps, and put them in a room for 30 days with direct access to me every day. Classified systems at their disposal 24/7, and they had 30 days unconstrained, other than the broad guidelines I laid out. This is where we think the world might be in 10 years from now. They had free rein to do it. They came up with a design, but in the end, the decisions are a single person, the commandant of the Marine Corps. But who's in the room? Sergeant Major of the Marine Corps, the head of aviation, the head of logistics. The key parts of the Marine Corps that would have to make this work, training and education, combat development, and the staff NCOs that work with them, 15, 20 people, that's it. But at that level, the second point is you're not looking for consensus. I never was. At that level, it's counterproductive. In fact, I would get worried if 15 people in a room all said this, let's do this. That means they're not comfortable challenging you. So I'm not ever looking for consensus. In fact, if there is consensus, I'd get worried. So I think you want an environment where people are challenging it. But those are the people.
We got time for one more question. Question front left here.
We can take one more from
Yeah,
you. It's okay. We're good.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Thank you.
Hi, ma'am.
My name is Dwan Adams, and I work in the Center for Public Service. I'm also from a service-driven family. My oldest brother was in the Marine Corps, youngest brother is a captain of the fire department, and I served in the Peace Corps. Here at the university, I design student leadership programs and would like to glean design elements. And at times, it's impossible to glean design elements through models that it doesn't exist. You mentioned it earlier. With that, through your lived experiences, maybe like kitchen table talks or so, what were some of the transformational experiences that has shaped your leadership journey that we wouldn't find in a model?
I should ask Master Sergeant to come up here because he's probably got colorful ones too. Leadership decisions, I'll just make it really brief. One I told earlier today, these are true, but I was a lieutenant, very young, and I needed to go get batteries from the company gunnery sergeant. I finally found him. He's sleeping underneath a vehicle. I kick his boots a few times, nothing happens. Eventually, something grumbles down there, and he yells at me and says, "Come back tomorrow." This is at night. I start walking back. I get about halfway there, and I go, well, what the heck am I doing? I go back. Long story short, he's teaching me. This is leadership up. He's training me. Because if the lieutenant had walked all the way back, that gunny wouldn't have zero respect for Lieutenant Berger. But he's teaching me. So I come back. Eventually, we get the batteries, and I learn a lot more. A lot of leadership, in other words, for me, has been learning from people who applied those to me, and how I responded was the key. And as long as I'm humble enough to learn and ask questions, I'll develop, and they'll give me second chances. But that gunny would not have given me a third, and he should not have. No. Most of my learning in my 42 years did not come from retired generals. It came from senior enlisted Marines who had patience in me. A lot of patience.
I'm David Edwards. We've met a couple of times, last on Iwo Jima a year and a half ago. It's fair to conclude from your comments that you've enjoyed your 42 years in the Marine Corps. What's the future of the United States military? What would you say to a second lieutenant? What would you say to an experienced officer with 23 years? Would you suggest they stay and go for commandant? And what's the future?
I think the future is probably like when I came in. It's awesome. It's wide open in front of you. In fact, more so. When I came in, women couldn't fly planes. They couldn't combat aircraft. They couldn't go into combat units. The military has evolved in my 42 years in a great way. The landscape in front of service members today is wide open in front of them. They have no idea what leadership they're going to learn. They won't till later. But they'll apply them in so many ways later. They'll have to learn in the military how to work with people they don't want to work with, in conditions they don't want to work in. That'll serve them well. Because too many people right now, If they don't like where they're working, they quit and they go somewhere else. I don't like him. I don't like her. Go somewhere else. You cannot do that in our world. So it forces you. It forces you to grow up. It forces you to mature. It forces you to become better. And in the process, I think you learn about what every citizen should understand. Yet we have a role. It's not a free lunch here. They're serving, right? They're contributing. And it's not just the military, but they're doing it in a really vital way. It's great. If I could change one thing, I'd like embed in high schools the whole notion of civics and why it's important for us to have an active role. It's not a free ride. You can't just go to the voting booth every 4 years or not. No, this is a democracy is like active participation. It's ugly, but it's active. In the military, I think it's a great future in front of them. That said, why did I stay? I think for a lot of reasons, but one of them is the highs and lows in the military, like a sinusoidal wave, are really high and really low. I think anything else I had done in life would have been more like this. I would have missed out on the highs. But I also would have missed out where he and I were in Fallujah, where there's a C-17 at night on a runway, and there are 11 or 15 caskets and 2 long lines of people facing inboard, while very solemnly those caskets are carried onto that aircraft, individually saluted. I mean, these are the lows, right? When you lose people that aren't coming back. But the highs are super high too. I don't know where else you would get that. It's not sports. I think I'm very optimistic, glass half full person on the military. And I think it gives an opportunity, somebody say 18, 19, 20-year-old, 21-year-old, that they will not get anywhere else. Even if they stay 4 years, it'll change them. It'll arm them.
So, we talk about recruiting for the military. I think we should have taped that and play that literally to anybody who's thinking about joining the military. I've never heard a more affirmative, inspiring statement about the value of not only the military, but serving in the military. We've gone over it. I know why. This has been very exciting. I started out by talking about the Tulane motto, not for oneself, but for one's own. And in a sense, the way you epitomize that. But your answer to the question of what gives you such joy, it's the success of the people who you're working with. I don't think I've heard a better statement about the importance of serving others, of the value of serving others, and we see in your success in the Marine Corps about what a difference it's made, not only to the Marine Corps, but our country. In any event, you make us proud, and I'm so proud we did this. Let's give a round of applause for General David Berger. That was really good. Thank you.